Sweet, let's get started. So, hi, I'm Sam Gardner. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin, and I've been working with Parker Schwab, a psychiatry resident, and his advisor, David Morrison, to put together an organizational and occupational psychiatry curriculum. And I will be covering parts 1 through 3.
All right, and I'm Parker Schwab. As Sam mentioned, I'm a PGY4 psychiatry resident currently at the timing of making these videos, and I will be covering the last 4 sections of this curriculum. And I'll leave it up to Sam to go through the first 3.
Sounds good. Sweet. So before we get into the presentation, there's just some things to disclose. So we wanted to say that we don't have any conflicts of interest and there are no financial disclosures. And then also throughout the presentation, we'll be using the term org psych. And for the purposes of this presentation, it'll be used to encompass both organizational psychiatry as well as organizational psychology. And there's a lot of overlap with these fields. However, it's important to remember that they are 2 distinct entities. Sweet, yeah. So I'll be walking us through the first part, which is just an overview of organizational and occupational psych. And so in hearing the topic of this lecture, you might have a few questions. You might be wondering what organizational psychiatry is, why we decided to choose this topic, and why is it relevant? Why should I be interested? So our hope is that by the end of this lecture series, we'll answer all of these questions, and hopefully we'll have inspired some of you to learn more, as it's an overlooked and not well taught field, but it has implications for everybody in the workforce. And so we're going to start with a time breakdown activity. So this shows all of the hours across the 7 days of the week. And first, we're going to start with an example of someone who works a typical 9 to 5, 40-hour work week. So we're starting with a blank slate, but of course, everyone needs sleep. So you factor this in 8 hours a night, which I know for some of you watching, that might not be typical, but we'll start there. And so that already takes a considerable chunk out of your free time. And then next, when you factor in 40 hours of work spread across Monday through Friday, you can see that it starts to eat away at free time. And then when you consider a profession that's more demanding, such as healthcare positions, you can see that this drastically eats into free time. And this is not great. This can lead to issues, and it can certainly have an impact on mental health and well-being. And so here we kind of switch from a visual example to give a more concrete view of the breakdown of allocation of time. And so you can see the relative proportions of free time, work, and sleep. And you can see that work, regardless of whether you have a conventional 40-hour work week or you're working in a more demanding position, work takes up a relatively large proportion of your time. And so, of course, this inevitably has an effect on your mental health. And this is really the focus of org psych, is the interplay between work and a career and mental health. And so with that example, we can launch into a definition of what org psych is. So as defined by the Academy of Organizational and Occupational Psychiatry, org psych is a field dedicated to the application of psychiatric principles and practices in the workplace to improve leadership, group interaction, and employee health and performance. And from this definition, you can see that there are kind of two different focuses to org psych. There's the organizational side, where the client is the organization. So this is focusing more on public health, policy, and structure, and how those affect employee well-being. And then there's also the occupational side, where the focus is on the individual. This is looking at the impacts of work on an individual's mental health and how issues with mental health can be navigated in the workplace setting. And so within org psych, there's a range of career pathways that you can choose to pursue. This could be something like consulting, whether that's organizational consulting, focusing on policy development and broader changes within an organization to promote employee mental health and well-being. Or it could be something like executive coaching, working with leadership, fostering stronger leaders, which also contributes to employee well-being as a whole. It could be general coaching, or it could be something like doing disability consultations. So navigating scenarios where mental health issues can result in a need for accommodations or leave from work. You can also find a career path in the military. This could be working with leadership or administration, or this could be doing fitness for duty evaluations. So evaluating whether whether someone is capable to serve. There's also career pathways in academics, and these include research, policy, and teaching. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, and we'll get into a little bit later, organizational psychiatry is kind of, I guess, underrepresented in most psychiatry programs. So this is an area with a lot of potential for growth. There's also career pathways in general psychiatry, again, looking at administration or leadership, or work with private or group practice, or work with employee assistance programs. And then in forensic psychiatry, they kind of specialize in navigating disability. So this could be finding accommodations or figuring out leave of absence. They also do fitness for duty evaluations. And then in the last section on psychotherapy, this is looking at the impact of work on self. So this could be looking at an employee's locus of control, or helping to boost an employee's sense of self. And so kind of across all these different career pathways, there's really kind of three durations of org psych work. There's brief work, which are single 1 to 2 hour sessions. And this includes things such as social security, disability, navigating workers' compensation, or doing fitness for duty evaluations. There are medium-term commitments, which could be something like an impaired professional evaluation. So this is looking at professionals who have behaviors or tendencies that are disruptive to the workplace, and then that need intervention and treatment. And this could be pharmacotherapy or psychotherapy. There's organizational consultations and policy and procedure development. And then in the long term, could serve as an in-house consultant, kind of on retainer for an organization, helping them navigate their organizational psychiatry needs. Could work with employee assistance programs, and you could work as a part of crisis management teams. So with a little bit of the context of org psych, we're going to go into some of the history, and this is by no means comprehensive, and the goal is just to provide a little bit of context of the field going forward. So it really emerged in the early 1900s with the development of experimental psychology as a distinct field itself. After this field emerged, industrial and org psych emerged as a subfield shortly after. And then kind of following in 1911 and 1913, there were the first publications on how concepts from psychology could be applied to the workplace. And so in this time period, the focus was really on how to leverage these concepts to maximize worker productivity. So the focus was really on how to help corporations kind of extract maximal usefulness from their workers. And then from the 1910s leading up to World War I, there was significant advancement in IO psych. And part of this was that psych was used to improve soldier selection. And so there was a big focus on it as a field. And then within this time too, the Journal of Applied Psychology emerged. And so then in the 1920s, we saw some of the first studies examining the effects of workplace conditions on worker productivity. So there was the Hawthorne study, which found that worker behavior changes while being observed. So generally, workers tend to work harder when they know that they're being observed. And then there are a few other experiments and studies as well that were just looking at other aspects of the workplace environment and their corresponding effects on productivity. And then the next big shift came in the 1960s and 70s. And this was a shift to focusing on worker motivation. And this kind of came in tandem with Carl Rogers' work on self-actualization, Maslow's work, B.F. Skinner's work on operant conditioning. And then in this time too, Douglas McGregor put forward his X and Y theory, which is that X assumes that warning and punishment is necessary because at a base level, people don't want to work. And then Y assumes that in a supportive environment, self-direction boosts employees' achievements. And in addition, there was also work done by Frederick Herzberg, David McClelland, and Victor Vroom on worker motivation. And so following this in the 70s and 80s, there was the development of the Handbook and Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychiatry, or Psychology, excuse me. And so this was just kind of putting like an organized professional base into place for research and implementation. And then following this in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was another kind of shift in focus. And this was looking at the result of stress on performance. And it was kind of the first time that the notion of the importance of work-life balance emerged. In addition, there was also research onto the impacts of varying leadership and how innovation and adaptability contribute to the work environment. And then it's worth noting that there was also writing by Sperry, Kahn, Langley on mental health in the workplace. And so then moving into the present and future, the prominent focuses are really on the impact of automation, big data, AI, how they affect the workplace, their function and their effect on employee well-being. And then we also had the COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in a large shift to remote or hybrid work. And so that's also something that's relatively new and has implications for employee well-being. And then perhaps in more recent years, there's been the concepts of quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, which again is just kind of a large perspective shift towards work, on the attitude towards work and the meaning of work in life. And then, of course, there's been a big focus on DEI and the role that it plays in employee health and well-being as well. So with some of the context of the history, we can actually kind of start to get into some of the specifics of org psych. And so for getting into the field, it's notoriously not an easy field to break into. And this is for a couple reasons. Businesses are traditionally skeptical of psychiatry. So what benefit does incorporating organizational psychiatry actually pose for the business? What are the costs? Is it necessary? And so it's up to the organizational psychiatrists to be able to concisely and clearly explain the relevance and benefits. And so as a part of this, there are a few qualities that are essential to being a successful organizational psychiatrist. And those are relationship building and trust. Rapport is essential in kind of conveying the importance and relevance of your work. And so, yeah. And so this is just kind of a really brief overview, hopefully giving a little bit of context on the history of the field, some of the directions that it can take you, and some of the considerations when choosing an org psych path. So in the next section, we'll go a little bit further into why org psych matters.